For centuries, a question has echoed through time, whispered in cathedrals, debated by scholars, and buried in forgotten scrolls. What truly happened during the years of Jesus that the Bible remains silent about? Between his childhood in Nazareth and the beginning of his ministry, there lies a gap of nearly 2 decades, a silence so deep that even the Gospels seem to avoid it. Yet, beyond the walls of the canonical Bible, ancient texts once read by early believers tell stories the world was never meant to hear. These are the forbidden Gospels, the writings that claim to fill the missing chapters of the Messiah's life. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered in the sands of Egypt in 1945, was one of the first to resurface after nearly 2,000 years. It contains sayings attributed to Jesus, some familiar, others completely foreign to traditional Christianity. "Split a piece of wood," it says, "and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me." Mysterious, symbolic, unlike the parables of Matthew or Luke. Many scholars believe this gospel offers a glimpse of a Jesus who speaks not through miracles or prophecy, but through riddles, almost as if he were leading his followers toward a secret knowledge, a wisdom hidden from the crowd. But there are other writings, texts, the early church called dangerous. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas tells of a young boy unlike any other. In it, the child Jesus is described as performing strange acts of power, giving life to clay birds, cursing other children who angered him, and revealing knowledge beyond his age. To some, these stories were blasphemous. To others, they were evidence that his divinity was always present, even before his ministry began. Whether truth or legend, these passages raise a haunting question. What kind of boy was the Son of God during those silent years? In dusty libraries and sealed archives, fragments of forgotten manuscripts still tell parts of this hidden story. The Gospel of the Egyptians, the Gospel of Mary, and the Gospel of the Hebrews all hint that the message of Jesus was far broader than the texts we know today. These Gospels often portrayed a world where divine knowledge could be sought directly, without the need for temple or priest. And perhaps that was why they were silenced. For a world that depended on hierarchy and control, the idea that divine truth could live inside every soul was far too dangerous to allow. Some historians believe that during those missing years, Jesus may have traveled far beyond the land of Israel. Ancient legends from India and Tibet tell of a holy man from the West, who studied the sacred laws and spoke of love and compassion. Could these stories be echoes of the same man the world would later call the Christ? No archaeological proof confirms it, yet the parallels are uncanny. The teachings of forgiveness, humility, and peace found in Eastern scriptures sound eerily familiar to the words later spoken on the hills of Galilee. As centuries passed, the Church sought to define which writings were sacred and which were not. Councils gathered, scrolls were examined, and decisions were made that would shape the faith of billions. Some Gospels were chosen, others condemned to obscurity. The ones that spoke of mystery, hidden wisdom, or alternate journeys of the Messiah were deemed unfit for the canon. They were buried, burned, or forgotten. Yet somehow, they survived, preserved by monks, hidden in caves, or sealed within desert jars, until the time was right for them to be rediscovered. Imagine a world where those texts had never been lost. How different would Christianity look today? Would we know a Jesus who journeyed beyond the desert, who learned from sages in distant lands, who saw divinity as something within all humanity rather than something to be worshipped from afar? The thought itself is both fascinating and unsettling. Perhaps that's why these writings were suppressed, not because they were false, but because they were too powerful. The mystery of the missing years is not just about history. It's about what humanity fears to know. The silence in the Bible may not be an absence, but an invitation to seek, to question, to look beyond the boundaries of what has been handed down. The forbidden Gospels challenge the believer and the skeptic alike to consider that faith and knowledge might not be opposites, but mirrors of the same truth. Somewhere between myth and memory, between revelation and suppression, lies the story of a man whose life changed the course of history, and yet whose full story remains untold. And as we look deeper into these forgotten writings, one thing becomes clear: the image of Jesus that emerges from the apocryphal texts is not one of contradiction, but of complexity. A teacher of hidden wisdom, a traveler of worlds, a bridge between the divine and the human. The missing years may never be fully known, but their echoes continue to call across the ages, inviting us to listen not only to what was written, but to what was erased. The more we explore the apocryphal texts, the more the image of a young Jesus expands beyond the narrow frame of conventional history. In the Gospel of Peter, some fragments hint at journeys and encounters with teachers and prophets whose names are lost to time. Though the surviving text is brief, scholars speculate that these passages describe a formative period, a time of learning and revelation that shaped the man who would later challenge kingdoms, priests, and customs. Every fragment feels like a whisper from the past, urging us to fill in the gaps with careful thought and imagination. The Infancy Gospel of James adds another layer to the story, focusing on Mary, his mother, and her preparation for a destiny intertwined with divine purpose. In these stories, the boy Jesus is not yet performing miracles for the crowds, but his presence is unmistakable. Every word, every gesture hints at a consciousness that is not entirely human. Readers centuries ago would have been unsettled, perhaps even afraid, by the idea of a child so powerful, so aware, and so capable of extraordinary acts. And yet, these stories survived, tucked away in monasteries and codices, as if the world might one day be ready to hear them. Legends from lands far beyond Judea speak of a teacher who carried a wisdom that bridged east and west. Some texts suggest that during the silent years, Jesus may have journeyed along trade routes through Persia, India, and even the lands of the Himalayas. These travels, if true, would have exposed him to philosophies and disciplines that shaped his understanding of the human heart, suffering, and compassion. It is a tantalizing thought, the Messiah, learning, questioning, growing, in places so distant from his humble beginnings. The forbidden Gospels also hint at conflicts, both internal and external. The young Jesus is portrayed as aware of forces that oppose him, powers that fear the knowledge he carries. In the Gospel of Thomas, cryptic sayings imply a struggle between revelation and concealment, between those who seek to understand and those who seek to control. This tension is not just historical, it resonates even today, in the questions we ask about power, faith, and truth. The missing years were, perhaps, years of preparation, a quiet struggle that would later erupt into public ministry. As we piece together these fragments, it becomes clear that the early followers of Jesus were not unanimous in their understanding. Different communities preserved different memories, emphasizing teachings that resonated with their experience. Some focused on wisdom, others on miracles, others on ethical conduct, and in the process, what became canonical was only a fraction of the stories circulating in the ancient world. The forbidden texts, by contrast, allow us to glimpse a fuller, more intricate picture, a world alive with possibility, questions, and wonder. One of the most striking aspects of these apocryphal writings is their portrayal of Jesus as a human deeply engaged with the mysteries of life. He is curious, questioning, learning, experimenting. In the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, he tests the boundaries of his power, sometimes harshly, sometimes playfully, suggesting a development of understanding rather than immediate perfection. This human dimension makes the mystery of the missing years all the more compelling. It is a story of growth, struggle, and discovery hidden from the pages of the New Testament. Even today, as modern scholars study these texts, debates rage. Some dismiss them as myth, legend, or heresy. Others see in them a window into the social, political, and spiritual contexts of the time. What is undeniable, however, is that they spark curiosity. They invite us to ask, what does it mean to truly know someone? And if the most influential figure in human history carried secrets in his youth, how might our understanding of faith, history, and humanity change if we dared to explore them? The forbidden Gospels are more than just writings. They are an invitation. They challenge us to read between the lines, to listen for what has been silenced, to imagine a life that was lived in full before the world knew his name. Each fragment, each cryptic saying, each strange narrative is a puzzle piece in a story that has captivated minds for centuries. The missing years, elusive and enigmatic, are not a void. They are a landscape of possibility, of questions that continue to resonate in the hearts of those who seek knowledge. And so we arrive at a final thought. History is never truly complete, and faith is never fully revealed. The forbidden Gospels remind us that there is more to every story than meets the eye. They whisper of journeys, of teachings, of mysteries that the world once tried to suppress. They ask us not only to wonder, but to seek. And perhaps, in that seeking, we touch something timeless, a glimpse of a life lived in depth, a voice speaking across centuries, inviting us to consider not only what is written, but what lies hidden, waiting to be discovered.